All right, in this problem, we're given a bunch of statements, and we're asked to prove another statement about this segment that's given to us. So if you look at the original diagram, it's told us that UV and XY are congruent. So I'm going to label as I go. So UV and XY are congruent. It also said that VW is congruent to WX, and that WX is congruent to YZ. And we're asked to prove that UW and XZ are congruent to each other. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite all of my givens. That's UV is congruent to XY. VW is congruent to WX. And you want to rewrite the given every time, even though you have it written right above. And then, of course, that would be given. Right? And then you also know that at the end, you're eventually going to have UW and XZ congruent to each other. So if you reread the givens, you see that VW is congruent to WX and WX is congruent to YZ. So that should make sense. That right there should tell you that VW is congruent to YZ. They're both congruent to the same WX, so they must be congruent to each other, as an example of transitive property. Transitive. Their two things are equal to the same thing, so they're equal to each other. Now, we're kind of stuck once we get to this transitive property. There's not much else you can do with these givens. So when you get stuck with the givens, make sure you always go back and look at your picture. And if you notice, we have to prove something about UW and something about XZ. And if you notice, there is no UW in the given at all or an XZ anywhere in these givens. So what we're going to do is use our picture to help. So UW is equal to what two segments put together. And if you notice in the picture, UW is equal to UV plus VW. And you can say the same thing about XZ. XZ is equal to which two segments added together? XY plus YZ. And if you're listening, we were saying adding segments together, which means segment addition. Segment addition says that you can add those two little pieces together and it gets that larger segment, in this case UW and XZ. Now, what you're going to do is try to force these two to look the same. But before we do that, you would realize that these have equals. These are talking about lengths that are equal, and these are congruent segments. So what we're going to do is convert all of our congruents to equals. Now, I'm only going to convert certain ones. I'm going to convert this one and this one. And the reason I'm not converting these two right here is because I've already used these for my transitive property. So now I have UV is equal to XY. And notice I've dropped the segment symbol and I've dropped the congruent and I've changed it to equal. So UV is equal to XY and VW is equal to YZ. And the reason I can do that is the definition of congruent segments says that if two segments are congruent, then their lengths are equal, or vice versa. If the two lengths are equal, the segments are congruent. Now what we're going to do is literally, I am going to take one of these. It does not matter which one. I'm going to take one of them and rewrite. So I'm going to bring this UW down. But instead of writing it as UW is equal to UV plus VW, I am now going to substitute something in the place of UV. And if you notice, UV is equal to XY. So I'm going to take XY and I'm going to put it where UV was. And then I'm going to take YZ and I'm going to put it where VW was. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if you notice now, XZ is equal to this, XY plus YZ, and UW is equal to XY plus YZ. So because both of them are equal to the same thing, these two must be equal to each other. So my next step is going to be UW is equal to XZ. Now let me go back and write our reasons. What was the reason that I got this xy and yz is because I substituted something for something else. I substituted xy for uv, and I substituted yz for vw. So right here, we did substitution by substituting something that was equal. And then from here to here, this is an example of transitive property, because if you remember, uw was equal to the yellow, xz is equal to that same yellow, and so they have to be equal to each other. And since they're equal to each other, now we get to our last statement, which says if two things are equal in length, then those two segments must be congruent. Definition of congruent segments.